Last summer, I booted up a Persona game for the first time. If only I had known what I was getting myself into. Hundreds of hours played, hundreds of dollars spent on dead consoles. At this point, I'm determined to play every game in the series. Yes, that includes this, and this. I just can't get enough Persona, so you can imagine my excitement when Persona 5 Strikers finally released in the West on February 23rd. Ah, yes, after waiting a long, grueling 5 minutes, I've got more Persona. In fact, I took a break from playing one Persona game so I could play another Persona. And I paid extra money to be able to do it a few days early. I definitely don't have a problem, but this one's a bit different than the others. Strikers is an actual sequel to Persona 5, instead of just some spin-off that gives off really bad fanfiction vibes. As I waited for this game's English release, I was still really skeptical of it as a legitimate sequel, and that's because Strikers is not a turn-based JRPG like Persona 5 is. It's a hack-and-slash game, specifically a Musou game. That's the name given to titles made by Omega Force of Dynasty Warriors fame. This studio co-developed Persona 5 Strikers and, in general, churns out a lot of licensed games. In a Musou game, you plop down on a battlefield and mow down hordes of enemies who have rocks for brains, over and over and over again. On the surface, it seems like it would get old really fast, and in my experience, it totally did. I bounced off the new Hyrule Warriors game really hard, which is such a shame because it's a prequel to Breath of the Wild. On paper, this should have been entirely up my alley. So, I set out on a journey to play Strikers, guided by one big question. What value does this chapter add to the whole Persona 5 experience? To me, the answer is a bit complicated. And it might be for you too, depending on which version of Persona 5 you're familiar with, the original or the definitive version Royal. Though the game mostly follows vanilla Persona 5, there are a few references to events in Royal. You can say it's a sequel to either or, it really doesn't matter for most of the game, at least until you get to Striker's final act. So, let this serve as a light spoiler warning. I won't be talking about Striker's story in detail, but I will be sharing my thoughts on the ending in broad strokes.
Yeah, summer vacation, here we come!
After a brief tutorial section, Persona 5 Strikers takes you back to a classic location, Yongen Jaya, the protagonist's home in the first game. Upon returning for the summer, you're greeted by your caretaker Sojiro and all your friends in the Phantom Thieves. This is the crew that you fell in love with, the reason you spent all those hours playing the original. I was worried at first that some of the cast's charm would get lost in this follow-up, but that's not the case at all. These are still the same Phantom Thieves you know and love. The best part of spending time with your friends again is seeing what's new in their lives since you last saw them at the end of Persona 5. Some are in college now, some have overcome their biggest fears, and some will truly never change. Persona 5 Strikers succeeds in capturing the joy of seeing those close to you again. And in these times, it's kind of nice to remember what that feels like. This is not as long a game as others in the series. I beat it in just 52 hours, which in Persona time is very short. But even with an abbreviated runtime, it's still full of memorable scenes, some that ended up being my favorite in the whole series. And here's where being a sequel really works in the game's favor. This group already has a strong rapport with each other. They're able to go straight into clowning around, and that results in a game that's packed with as many funny moments as Persona 5, but in half the time. Throughout the story, everyone gets their chance in the spotlight, and that's in spite of a huge omission that I'm sure will polarize a lot of fans. I'm talking about the removal of social links, aka confidants. In previous Personas, social links are events that grow your relationship with other characters. They provide backstory, advance the plot, and also grant you new abilities in battle. It's a game mechanic that incentivizes spending time with people. Doing so improves your chances of success in battle, but the perks are nice, and they help reinforce the core message of the system, that as long as you have people who care about you, there's no challenge you can't overcome. Strikers doesn't have this. Instead, there are bond levels. Increasing your level rewards you with bond points, which you can then use to buy and upgrade skills. It's not as deep a system as social links are, but bond levels work well enough. They rank up pretty naturally as you progress, though you can speed them up by completing side requests. Doing so will also add more items to the shop, earn you more powerful weapons, and a few other useful things. So yeah, do those requests. More of them become available as you and the crew visit some of Japan's most major cities. The majority of Persona 5 takes place in Tokyo, which is by no means small, but it's really refreshing to go beyond that in Strikers. And if you're someone like me who stops to talk to everyone and read flavor text, you'll learn a thing or two about every place you visit. It's really nice to live vicariously through Joker, since obviously international travel is not really a thing at the moment. Exploring cities also provides you with even more opportunities to hang out with the Phantom Thieves, like joining Ryuji on his cross-country quest for the best bowl of ramen. You can learn a lot about each character's personalities based on the hijinks they get into during their free time. You can also learn a lot about their personalities in combat. That's right, their traits are often expressed through how they choose to fight. When Ryuji is in, Brain is turned off. He's just trying to hit dingers to center field. Haru shows us exactly why you shouldn't annoy a girl with an axe. An brings the heat, quite literally, turning foes extra crispy. Makoto does her best Tifa Lockhart impression by just straight up beating your ass. Yusuke makes his case for why he should be the next DLC character in Devil May Cry 5. Futaba doesn't really fight, but she hacks real good, so shout out to her. Morgana. And of course, Joker, the power of the wild card. He's more OP than John Cena during the PG era. I said earlier that I've never been a fan of Musou games because I found the gameplay boring. Well, fighting in this game is certainly not boring. There's layers to the combat and plenty of room for strategy. It's obviously much different than turn-based combat, but I gotta say, it really suits this franchise well. Being able to use your Persona skills adds a much-needed dimension that keeps this from being just a slash fest. It's a lot of fun chaining together combos that end with an elemental attack. Plus, using elements as part of a combo doesn't cost any SP, which all Persona fans know is a crucial resource to conserve. It's also just very satisfying to get the drop on your enemies, strike their weakness, and then team up for an all-out attack. There are 9 playable characters, and you can have up to 4 in your party, including yourself. There's lots of opportunities to mix it up and try different team makeups. This part is really important, because no one team is perfect for every single scenario. Some characters' strengths are very situational. They'll be a boon against enemies with that specific affinity as a weakness, but those same characters can be a liability against foes who nullify those attacks, or even absorb them as health. So you want to make sure your party has all their bases covered. Fortunately, that's made much easier by the fusion system, which Strikers retains from Persona 5, albeit in a more simplified form. Fusion is when you sacrifice 2 or more personas to create a new one. Unlike your teammates, Joker can carry more than one, and that number increases as the game progresses. But even early on, if you take your time planning out fusions, your fleet of emo Pokemon can cover all the elements, meaning in theory, you could fight alone and still down all your enemies. Again, in theory. But where's the fun in that, right? When you've got all your buds, as well as 2 new playable characters, Sophia and Zen Kichi. Sophia wields yo-yos, which makes the rhythm of her attacks quite different than the rest of the crew. When stringing together combos, you need to time your button presses for when she reels the yo-yos back into her hands. There's a wide window, so you don't have to be perfect, but occasionally I'd still miss the timing and the combo would stop cold. I often included Sophia in my party not just for story reasons, but because she's a very useful ally. Her bless skills are powerful and she can play the role of healer. You can also improve the strength and range of her attacks by perfectly timing the combo to the moment her hands flash red. But a perfect catch can be hard to achieve when there's just so much happening on screen. Zen Kichi is an excellent party member who dishes out massive damage. You have to be somewhat careful when using him, because activating his Fury ability chips away at his health. It's easy enough to regain though. Just keep defeating enemies and you'll find him absorbing lost HP. What makes Zen Kichi so special is that he has no affinity weaknesses. You can plug him into any team and he won't be the worst option. Plus, he doesn't use elemental skills like everyone else. He uses Almighty, which no enemies are resistant to. There's good reason to be familiar with all the Phantom Thieves. Not only does it keep the game fresh, but you also expand their movesets the more you play with them. You unlock their Master Arts, which are unique moves that add bonuses to their combos. For example, one of Makoto's Master Arts adds nuclear to her punches, while one of Yusuke's greatly increases the duration of his flurry attacks. Speaking of Yusuke, he is definitely my favorite character to play as. He's a speed demon with his katana, and he's even able to counter enemy attacks. There are few things more satisfying than slicing and dicing your way through a huge group with those powerful flurries. He's excellent at turning defense to offense, so if you're getting swarmed by shadows, simply switch to Yusuke and watch how quickly he's able to clear everyone out. Joker may have the most combo variety because of all the personas he can use, but it's Yusuke who steals the show. Story-wise though, the MVP award goes to Sophia. She's such a welcome addition to the team, being both one of the sweetest members as well as funniest. She's eager to learn about the world around her, and then use that new knowledge the very first chance she gets. Her childlike wonder results in interactions that are equal parts hilarious and heartwarming. And when she grapples with the nuance of human emotions, sometimes I'd have to stop and think too. Why do we say certain things and behave certain ways? A lot of times, the answer isn't so simple. Zen Kichi also adds a lot to the Phantom Thieves. He's the only full-on adult on the team, and they love to poke fun at him about it. But he has some things they don't. Tons of inside connections and resources. He aids their investigations in ways they wouldn't be able to. That cuts down on a lot of time and struggle. Like these kids, Zen Kichi has a strong sense of justice. Him joining them signals his belief that going through legal avenues isn't enough. As you learn more about his tragic personal life, you feel the same way too. Now, by this point, I'm sure it's clear I had a lot of fun with Persona 5 Strikers. Unfortunately though, my enjoyment started fading in the last few hours. Remember earlier in the video when I said it doesn't matter for the most part which Persona 5 this is a sequel to? Well, now it does. I won't say or show specifics, but I'm still gonna give another spoiler warning right here. Ready? Okay. The big villain of Strikers shares identical motivations with the one in Royal, and the game's final boss is essentially the same as the one in Vanilla. Yeah, Strikers rehashes the endings from both Persona 5 games. As long as you've played at least one of these two versions, you are guaranteed to be treading the same water. The characters even say as much, making references applicable to both endings, at least in the English localization. I think I'm more disappointed in Strikers' final act because I feel it confirms my worst fears, that they've kind of run out of stories to tell in the Persona 5 world. If multiple games tackle the same handful of themes and come to the same narrative conclusions, what more is left to say? Royal and Strikers were announced one day apart from each other in April 2019. Their side-by-side development makes it unlikely that their similar endings were done on purpose, and yet it happened anyway. As to why the final bosses in Vanilla and Strikers are carbon copies, that's a conscious choice, one that I think undoes a lot of what the game does right. So, to answer the question I posed at the beginning, what value does this chapter add to the whole Persona 5 experience? To me, it doesn't add a lot, because you're not coming to some new understanding of the world or gaining a new perspective on the original. You're just playing through it again. I still recommend it to fans of the series, even if it's not going to be a revelation. At the end of the day, it's still a better game than most. The Musou gameplay really fits in here, and I wonder, will the next mainline Persona go back to strictly turn-based combat, or will it adopt a little bit of this style? The music is awesome, of course, as always. These new songs and remixes will definitely be part of my permanent rotation. And Sophia and Zen Kichi really are wonderful characters. Even in my frustration, I was sad when credits rolled, because there's always the possibility that this is the only time these two will appear. Until it's time for a new dancing game, of course. Well, that's all I've got on Persona 5 Strikers. It's a fun road trip and reunion that is let down by its final hours. Thanks so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed. If you'd like more videos on the Persona series, go ahead and let me know in the comments. Till next time, peace.